When you realize it's a feature, not a flaw, then in love for that person, you can go to them and say, hey, let me explain to you why this feature of yours might not be the best thing right in this moment for you. Welcome to the Working Genius podcast, where we discuss anything and everything having to do with the 6 types of working genius and how it impacts your work and your life. I'm Pat Lencioni, your host, joined by Cody Thompson, my co-host. How are we doing today, Cody?
Another good day, Pat.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And another good podcast topic. Although we don't have a topic title, do we?
We have a topic, no title. Matt's going to figure out if we say anything smart and use that as the title. But the topic is around the fundamental attribution error.
Right. Which I like to say I learned about in college in social psychology, which is one of the few specific things I remember learning in college that I actually use on a regular basis. And so I'll explain it really quick. The fundamental attribution error is very simple, but very dangerous and tragic because it happens all the time. It's when we attribute another person's behavior that annoys us. We attribute it to their character. We make a fundamental attribution that they are doing that on purpose because they have a flaw. And yet when we do something that annoys other people, we attribute it to our environment. We say, well, I'm not usually like that. It's just that everything going on is making me like that. So we judge others. We jump to conclusions about why other people do things, and we attribute it to their intentions, but we don't do it to ourselves. And this is one of the real tragic ways that people's relationships suffer and people get judged because people think that they're doing something just to be annoying, when in fact, what Working Genius shows us is they do it because they're good at it and they like to do that, which doesn't mean it's always called for, but their intentions are good and they're actually working out of a feature of who they are rather than a flaw.
Right. And I think it's interesting this concept has actually helped me both in personal relationships and work relationships, because if you start to view things through that lens and you become aware of it, you realize how often we do this. We do this in traffic. And we actually can do it both on a negative side and a positive side. Like where if somebody, the example we often use when we're explaining the concept is when somebody cuts you off in traffic, you think, well, that's a bad person. They're probably not a good dad, or they're probably, a derelict member of society. And when we cut somebody off in traffic, we're like, oh, I'm sorry, I was late. My kids didn't know what shoes to put on when we were getting out the door, and we're trying to get to soccer practice. So you attribute it to these environmental factors and you give yourself a pass. And on the flip side is like, it can happen in a really positive way, is like somebody gets a job or a promotion and we go, or we don't get one. And we think like, well, they only got it because of the circumstances of this rather than who they are, what they are good at. And I didn't get it because I bombed the interview because I woke up late that day. So it works on both sides, but it's super helpful to be aware of in every circumstance.
It's so funny that you mentioned that example about the driving. I'd forgotten about that. Just this morning, I was driving before work today, and I was going down this highway. I live in Tennessee now, and I was on a busy street. Highway is just a 2-lane street, and this woman was trying to get into traffic, but I thought, well, I'm supposed to keep going. And then just as I went by her, I thought, I could have slowed down and let her in. I wonder if I should have. And I looked in my rearview mirror, and darn it, the person behind me was slowing down to let her in. And I thought, I should have let her in. And she might have thought, well, that guy's a jerk. And I would say, no, I'm from California. We don't do that there. I just arrived here. I'm not used to this yet. But it's so common that when we see somebody do something that we find to be distressing or annoying, we say, you do that because that's your intention. And the more we can understand their working genius, the less likely we are to judge them, which is really good, because sometimes we hurt people by judging them when in fact we just don't understand them. St. Francis of Assisi once said, seek to understand others more than even to be understood. And I think that the more we can understand others, the less likely we are to judge them, and then they'll provide the same courtesy. And that lady will let me into traffic the next time I'm in that situation.
Well, and Pat, like we said this at the very beginning, and now we're 3.5, 4 years into this working genius sort of not experiment, but so many people have benefited from this. And it's often we talk about, it helps you identify the type of work you love. And it does all those things. But one of those sort of fundamental underlying or underpinning fallouts of this is like, that it reduces guilt and judgment, and that's so core to what we're doing. Is Matt just said that's the title. That's the smartest thing I said was the stumbling. So thank you, Matt. Go ahead and make that a title. But the I think that is a core tenet to this whole thing is if we can eliminate some guilt and judgment in our personal lives and then on our teams, that takes us to a whole nother level of relationship. And I think the fundamental attribution error is a perfect way of dovetailing that with these personality traits that we have around working genius.
That's right. So let's go through, Cody, each of the 6 letters. Now, we could do it for the combinations too, but then it gets into so many permutations and combinations. But let's go through each of the 6 letters themselves and talk about some of the fundamental attribution errors that people will make about people who have that letter. That is, they'll say that it's a flaw in them or something they do to bother people, when in fact, it's just that's where they get joy and energy. And we need to not only understand that, but we need to embrace that. And even if they're doing something that's not called for in that moment, rather than criticize them, we can just say, hey, maybe this isn't the best time for this, but it's not a problem, that you're not doing anything wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Make sense?
Yeah. Great. Let's go. Let's start with W.
Wonder. All righty. So people with wonder, we know, are people that ponder things and they ask questions, and it's a very responsive genius because they're looking in the environment. And it's very easy for people that have this genius to be thought to be like, they're not focused, they're daydreaming, or they're so skeptical, they're constantly questioning things. Why don't they just get on board? Or they're making excuses to avoid work. It's easy to think like, why are they still asking questions? They just not want to get on with it. Or maybe even, gosh, they're just afraid to commit to something. All of which are couched as negative things, when in fact, what they are is they're just wanderers, and they're contributing by doing these things. And if it annoys us, it might be more because of where we are, or because the situation we're in might not necessarily call for it, but they're just doing the thing they're great at.
Yeah, it's funny. I didn't think about this until you went through those things, but just yesterday I was guilty of the fundamental attribution error around a wanderer. Because it was very much like a person who, after many years of evidence and relationship, is still exploring other things. And I was like, man, what is that? Like, why are you like that? And I did make a negative attribution to this person's character rather than say like, oh, that's actually a feature. That's how they're wired, and that's how they want to explore the world. And so the idea, and we'll get to mine, is partly because the same fundamental attribution or judgment you could make about discerners is we're quick to jump to a conclusion, whereas a wonder is like, no, I don't want to jump to any conclusions. I like the nuance. I like exploring. I like staying up in the cloud. So I did that just yesterday.
And one of the reasons, Cody, why it's so important not to do that is because when you realize it's a feature, not a flaw, then in love for that person, you can go to them and say, hey, let me explain to you why this feature of yours might not be the best thing right in this moment for you.
Right.
Rather than like, oh, this is so annoying. You're just annoying in that. Because like you said, like we like to say, one man's trash or one man's trash is another man's treasure. Well, one person's annoyingness is also a gift in a different context. So when you realize, oh no, that's a good thing in them, maybe though I can help them let go of that in this moment because it might not be serving them.
Yeah.
Make sense?
Totally.
All right. What about invention? People with a gift of invention. So I'm one of these people. And I really thought about like, what is it that people can misunderstand about a person with invention and jump to a conclusion about what they're doing that's annoying? And I think inventors can seem flaky because it's like, why are you trying to come up with another idea? You haven't even finished the last one, And it's not because we're flaky. It's because we don't know. It's hard to turn off that invention thing. It's what we do. Sometimes they can be accused of being ego-driven because it's like, do you really think you need to come up with another idea? And it's not like, oh, I'm not looking for attention. I just can't stop myself. I do this for fun and I do like to share them. The other one is that they're undisciplined because again, they're bopping around. Here's an idea. Here's another idea. And finally, that they're impatient because it's like, are you going to give that last idea any time? And it's like, oh, I would love to, but I can't turn off the conveyor belt. Like in I Love Lucy, more chocolate's coming. I can't not process this. So it's easy to judge them in those ways, when in fact, if we just go, oh, they really are like this. They do this because they're wired that way. It's a lot easier to appreciate them and even give them advice about how they might want to adjust a little bit at times.
Yeah, maybe we'll just play this ping pong game where I go, well, I've done that. So you describe what it is, and then I'll tell you how I've done the fundamental attribution error. But actually, I've done this with you, Pat. I mean, like, you are an inventor, and you come up with new ideas all the time. And there are seasons where I've not been as aware of what a gift that is, and I've been like, Pat, can you just let us take this last book and really turn it into something before you come up with the next one, or move on to the next idea, or and really, when you take a step back and go like, oh, actually, that's just who he is. That's wonderful. That's a gift to us. Like, but it does create some angst sometimes, and then we want to, because it causes angst in us, we want to like blame it on somebody else.
Yeah, and it's amazing the subtlety of the fundamental attribution error, because the difference might be, I might say, hey, Cody, I came up with this idea. And you're like halfway into implementing the last one. And the subtlety might be the difference between you going, ooh, I'd love to hear about it. Tell me about it. Now, of course, we're probably not in a position to act on it yet, but I'd love to hear about it, versus going like this, like, oh, okay. Well, yeah, what? It could be just that tone of voice or that body language that would send the signal like, you're annoying the crap out of me, versus, hey, I love letting you do this, but just so you know, I'm probably not ready to take it on yet, which I would be as an inventor, like, that's okay. Yeah. I just want to keep doing it, and I don't want to feel like I'm bothering you.
Yeah. Oh, now what? Like what's next? And I think it is really helpful to keep in mind of just like, hey, that's a huge gift. And when you have the level of trust and the understanding of working genius to say like, hey, you're going to keep doing that. Part of the reason I actually feel some guilt is because my natural inclination is discernment and galvanizing. So every time you come up with something, I almost naturally think, well, I like that, and I should run with it, but I'm in the middle of this other thing. So how helpful. That's incredibly helpful, even for our relationship, to tease it out that way.
That's great. And we're doing this in real time, talking about this right now, and we're exploring this. Let's go to the discerner. So people that are discerners, how do they get misjudged? Now they get accused of being overly judgmental because they're constantly using their judgment. Like somebody says, hey, I have an idea, and they'll go say, well, here's what I think is great about that. Here's what's not. It's like, why are you raining on my parade? And they're like, oh no, I'm sorry. I thought that's what I do. I see things like that. Or that they're overly critical. Like, can't you just encourage me? Or that sometimes a discerner, people will think, oh, you think you're smarter than everybody else, huh? Because they see something, they see a pattern, and they comment on it, and other people might not see it that way. And they're like, do you have to tell me why this might not work? Mm-hmm. And again, it's like they would say like, oh, I'm really sorry. I didn't mean to do that. It's just, that's naturally what I do. And I think I'm going to be helpful. And so sometimes we can go to a person like that and go, you're really good at evaluating this. I'm going to tell you a new idea. Right now, I probably need just you to listen to it and hold back on the judging it, because I'm still early in the process, and it might crush me. And a reasonable person will be like, oh yeah, I can do that. But what we do is when they provide discernment, we can go, man, you are just a critical, judgmental person who thinks you know more than everybody else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And as someone who has this and sometimes judge myself by this, but it can come across as like conviction and confidence, like overconfidence, and not leave a lot of room for other people's opinion or nuance or anything like that. It's like, oh, that's the right thing, or this is what we should do. And so even this morning, Julie and I are collaborating on a website project, and she's putting it, she wants some discernment around it. And I'm like, hey, I know that you put a lot of work into this, but you're asking me to do this. And so we have that level of relationship where she knows that I'm going to be critical of it. And there was one like little there was a macro sort of discernment area, and then there was like some stuff that was super micro. And she was like, "Hey, I'm juggling a lot right now. Can you just not micro discern this? I don't need that part of it." I'm like, "Oh, that's great." But it's because we operate with the understanding of that fundamental attribution error as hey, I'm not trying to do something that says you did it wrong. You're inviting this part of my discernment, and we can collaborate on this together.
And it's like, that's the difference between being intentional versus, and when somebody says, I intentionally am asking for this from you, and then we avoid this. But when somebody throws out something and somebody else uses their genius, and the people aren't really inviting it, they can get really annoyed and go, "Gosh, I can't stand that you do that." And I think it's important to go, "Hey, I'm sorry. That's just what I naturally do. I can edit that, or I can, what's the right word? I can govern that a little bit if you want, but just know that's kind of the natural thing I do first." And it even allows for some apology when somebody does judge you. You can go, "Oh, I'm sorry it made you feel that way, but I promise you I wasn't trying to. It's just kind of what I do."
It's
And that's
interesting.
not an excuse.
What the one thing that I hadn't thought of until now is, we often talk about conflict around an idea that can ferment into conflict around people if you don't talk about the idea. And I think that in some cases, like what we're talking about here, is if you aren't aware of the type of conflict it can cause, the fundamental attribution error based on working genius, it ferments into, well, that person is just like that. They're just judgmental rather than they have good judgment and I need their judgment. That turns into, that's a I am statement rather than that is part of their character, right?
Right. Exactly. And it's so great to go, "Oh, you actually have a skill." It's like they say, if you're a hammer, all the world looks like a nail. Well, even a well-intentioned hammer is going to hit the wrong thing sometimes. And if we go, "You're trying to hurt me," it's like, "No, this is just what I do. I'm sorry. I can't help it. I will try, though, to not hit the wrong thing." Let's go to the galvanizer, the G. You're a G. Galvanizers they can seem sometimes like they're over the top, like, because they could be like too quick. I mean, not too quick, but they're quick to go, "Yeah, let's do this," or maybe even bossy, which of course we need them to be direct and get people rallied. But then people would say, "You're being bossy." And then sometimes they can seem a little insincere if they're great at sales or rallying people, and people will unjustly question their sincerity because they're like, "Why are you so, jazzed up about this?" It's like, "Because this is what I do and I like doing this." So can you relate to being judged for those things, Cody?
Yeah, certainly, and it's hard to separate the discernment and galvanizing, because there are certain things that, like, when I really like something, I love telling people about it. But I think just galvanizing as it's on its own, it can come across like someone's enthusiastic about almost everything. Like, "Oh, that seems insincere because last week you were telling me about something different, and had that much excitement and energy, and this week it's something different." And so, I definitely think and there's a pushing element to galvanizing, like the bossiness that can come across. It'd be hard to judge someone who's constantly excited about something because that's often fun, but it can kind of grow a little, old if that's the case over and over and over again. And then I do think the bossiness piece probably does elicit quite a bit of judgment for galvanizers here and there.
Well, and the crazy thing about this, we talk about, God makes us all different. We need each other. But every one of these things we need, but then we get into a situation where in that moment, we don't need it. So then we judge the other person like, "Oh, you're doing that because, you're just annoying." And it's like, wait a second, 85% of the time you're thanking me for this. Now you're blaming me for this. You don't get both. So galvanizing, we need them to do it. I think that's an easy one. People can be like, "I wish somebody would rally us and make us do this." It's like kids need their parents to galvanize them, and they always complain about it when they do. You know, Kids are like, even kids want a parent to have them go to bed at night and to make them eat the right food and to do their homework. Because no kid is like, really wants to stay up all night because it's going to be terrible, or not do their homework because they're going to be miserable, or eat the wrong food because they're going to be really unhealthy. But when the parent does it, no kid goes, thanks.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, come on, don't make me go to bed, or let me have this right now, So it's galvanizers can get judged as bossy, even though they're doing the thing they're really good at.
Yeah, and it does. I love the repetition part of that, because galvanizing is not a one-time event. So it's like you're constantly saying, like, to your kids or to the coworkers, like, this is the thing. And sometimes people don't love that level of repetition. They can get annoyed by how often it comes up or is said.
Before we finish, I think one of the things to say here is, whatever your letters are, when somebody judges you for them, try to go, oh yeah, they're wrong. This is, if you're doing something in the way God wired you to do it, and somebody thinks, well, you're just like this, kindly help them understand, but don't not do what you're supposed to do. Now, granted, you can govern that depending on the circumstances, but protect yourself too and go, no, this is actually something that I'm good at doing. And if every once in a while somebody struggles with that, that's okay.
Well, and it does have the right time and context, which is great. And that's the one reminder, the way we can avoid the attribution errors, to say, like, oh, let's use that at the right time. That's wonderful.
Right. When somebody says to you, though, gosh, you're always doing this, that always word, that's not a good thing. And that's usually a sign where you go, yeah, I kind of think this is about you, not about me.
Mm-hmm.
You're always trying to come up with a new idea. It's like, yeah, I am. Yeah, I am. Now let's talk about people with enablement, because these are the nicest ones. And so how do they get judged? Well, they get judged as being, they're just unwilling to say no. They're afraid to say no. They're afraid. Or they're easy to manipulate. Or here's a very interesting one. People with enablement can get accused of being dishonest because they are quick to affirm and to help somebody. And so they like to respond and say, yes, I'll help you. So they're very quick to affirm, which is great. Later on, you can find out, well, actually, they had some reservations and they didn't say it to me. That's because they're dishonest. They were setting me up. And it's like, no. It's because they love to come along and say yes and to help people. And when 85% of the time, that's exactly what we need, we can't cherry pick the 15% of the time when we wish they had pushed back on us and say, yeah, that time you did it was with bad intentions. And I've done that many times. Like, why didn't you tell me? And they're like, well, Pat, because my first inclination is to want to help you, not to discern whether what you're asking me for is what you need.
Yeah. I wonder too, if they have a tendency, because they'll say yes so much, to overcommit. And then we can judge them like, well, that's their own fault. If they're burned out or they have too much on their plate, like we can even go as far as to say, well, that's a flaw because they will say yes to too much, and that's for them, and we don't have to have empathy.
Exactly. Oh man, think about how when we do this, and we'll take the good parts, and then when the bad part, not the bad part, but the uncomfortable part, either because of the situation or because of the mood we're in, comes up, we're quick to go, okay, now it's a bad thing.
Yeah.
What a great thing if we're like, oh man, you do that. Oh yeah, I understand that. And then you can actually say to them, I need something else from you. I'd like you to intentionally subjugate your enablement right now and lean into one of your other letters, because, and that's great. People are going to be really responsive to that.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about people with tenacity and what they get judged for unfairly. A lot of times they're seen as unsympathetic because they're so focused on getting something done, or that they're kind of anal. Like, why are you so determined to do it this way? Or that they're afraid to fail. And again, all of those are layered with accusation and judgment, as opposed to no. They get joy out of finishing things. And we want people like that. We need people like that. And is that going to occasionally annoy us? Probably. And that's not about them. That's about either the situation or something going on with us. And boy, we want to, what we do when we do the fundamental attribution error? We actually smash people's enthusiasm for what they're good at, and make it possible that we're going to lose that goodness all the times that we really need it.
Yeah. What was, remind me the first one you said for tenacity, Pat?
that they're unsympathetic.
Oh yeah, that they're very like task oriented and not very people oriented, and they can just say, the finish line is the finish line. Who cares who we run into on the way? Um, yeah, I think this is super helpful. I don't think you and I have explored this to this depth before, other than this conversation. But even just going through and realizing, yeah, I'm guilty of that. I do that. I'm guilty of that judgment. And then the freedom it can bring people to, like you said, not throw it all out, because we need this from these people. And there's the one or two times that we're like annoyed by it. It can cause them to recoil in a way where they don't want to give their gift to the team.
Exactly. What a wonderful thing too, that maybe going through these is a great way to think about, man, I need to apologize to people, because that goes a long way too. If you can think about like people that you've used this the wrong way and thought, something, I don't appreciate your wonder enough. And I've criticized you before for that, or any of these. And I think you can kind of revive a person's spirit by going back and I think you can actually recover from that and re-encourage a person to be who they are. And then they're going to give you permission to, when it's the wrong situation, to, in an encouragement way, to go, I love this about you, but just not right now.
Don't write any more books yet, Pat. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, we got work to do. But go, hey, I'm going to let you do that, but I'm going to explain to you why maybe I'm not going to give you everything you need around that, but I like you working out of your genius.
Mm-hmm.
All right. I think that can be, there's more here than we thought when we sat down to do this podcast, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. That's it. We stop when we're done, and I think we're done. All righty. Well, I hope that was interesting to everybody. We love when we have you on here. We love talking about Working Genius. We have so many people certified in Working Genius and people using it in their organizations and in their homes, both for productivity and for personal breakthroughs. And so thanks for doing that. Anything we can do for you, we're excited. We have a lot more coming, but we'll talk to you next time on the Working Genius podcast. God bless.